a discussion on Modi in the US, what can India expect? So, drones, fighter planes, work visas, bear hug, Pakistan, dinner at the White House, what all will Modi and Trump cover in one day, one work day? So he'll be there tomorrow and Saturday, and American CEOs are expected to meet Modi on Sunday, including Apple's Tim Cook, Walmart's Doug McMillan, Caterpillar's Jim Umpleby, Google's Sundar Pichai, and Microsoft's Satya Nadella. So when America takes America First too seriously, that may well push other countries to do the same for themselves. Incidentally, Modi will be talking about making India well. Modi will be talking about making India well before he meets Trump when he sits down with the CEOs on Sunday. The themes will not be terribly different from Trump's battle cry in the US elections. It will be done in Modi's signature style, though not in all caps on Twitter. And as the visit draws closer, forward movement on defense deals, either expression of interest or more than that is spiking, highlighting for Team Trump and India that is willing to buy military equipment and implicitly answer America's "what is in it for me" question. And news is just out on PTI that the US has cleared sale of 22 Guardian drones to India, and the deal is estimated to be worth about $2 to $3 billion. And PTA actually informed the government sources saying that the decision was decision was already communicated to the Indian government and the manufacturer by the State Department. And earlier this week, a Tata consultancy group, Tata Advanced Systems Limited, inked a deal with the US aircraft maker Lockheed Martin. Although this is not directly linked to Modi-Trump meeting, the signals are clear. The Americans are entered the fray, and they will be strong contenders when the global competitive bids are announced by the Ministry of Defense. But the new tweaks in defense procurement policy push for Make in India than off-the-shelf purchases rather would result in asking for transfer of production know-how to India rather than outright buys. And next item to check off will be H-1B visas. Will they come up one day, or what if they do come up? And something to be noted, let me conclude by stating that slowly but surely influential voices in reputed foreign policy magazines are singing a new tune about how Trump is a traditional president after all. If there is one thing you read on this theme, consider this excerpt from the latest issue on Foreign Affairs written by Elliot Abrams. The broad lines of Trump administration's policy, as he argues, fit easily within those of the last few decades. Trump might not be a conventional president, but so far his foreign policy has been remarkably unremarkable. Every administration's policies are a combination of the old and the new. In Trump's case, the expectations was that the mix would change. A great deal more of the new and a broad rejection of the foreign policies of Trump's recent predecessors. That was certainly the impression left by Trump's rhetoric, but his foreign policy and his national security appointees are so far pointed in a mostly conventional direction. But again, the situation in 2017 is different. In the last 5 months since its inauguration, Trump has made it clear that no international relationship can be taken for granted, and it will be difficult to predict American foreign policy principles will be adhered to in the new administration, and which policies will be adhered to in the new administration and which will be dropped without ceremony. So as President Trump has already spoken to Modi twice and sent his national security advice to the region, but he has also criticized India on a tough tariff regime on immigration and professional visas, and by withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accord, accused India of taking billions and billions of US aid to fund its commitments. And India has not been the biggest priority on Trump's list of meetings with world leaders. The focus has been on America's closest alliances in Europe and Japan, the problem areas such as China and Turkey. So there are indications of likely agreements to be announced on counter-terror cooperation, maritime traffic facilitation and trade. However, it would be wise to put off more substantial decisions on military cooperation and such other things, as many argues now. So, with this introductory remarks, I open the floor for panelists. Each panelist, starting with Professor Deepa M Ollapally, Professor Rajeev Sreenivasan, and Vinson Xavier Palathingal will speak. Each panelist can take up to from 10 to 15 minutes, and then we will take up questions and further discussions. Thank you very much.
Although it's a bit early here, I have to participate from the US, and you've given a very nice overview of some of the things that are back. So what I want to do is spend a few minutes saying what I think are basically five points that I want to make. Starting with the fact that number one, we are all quite aware that both Trump and Modi have their reputations preceding them. They are well known as very tough men, strong leaders, very forceful, big personalities, both the big personalities, and there are no shrinking violence, unlike some of our other previous leaders. In fact, I think Trump in some ways seems to like sort of the tough guy colleagues. He's here, whether it's Abe or Putin and so forth, Xi Jinping. So I think there's a very big presence on the global stage. But despite that, I think there's a consensus that we should expect a low expectation. On the other hand, one of the things about Trump is that sometimes he gets surprised. So he is liable to one time say for sure that, but I think my own view is that we should have very low expectations of what might actually come up. Even though I would call Trump a kind of a wild card. I think the main thing for this meeting is to see what kind of personal rapport they can develop. Can they hit it off as here to leaders? Are there going to be some personal chemistry that they can develop? And even Obama and Modi ended up having very good personal chemistry, even though you might not have expected it. And I think the point is, can they build a personal relationship? This is one-on-one. Can they build a personal relationship to take the relationship forward for the next 3 to 4 years? I think that's really the question. So that's a sort of a basic expectations that one would have. You'd be looking for body language, what kind of declaration or statement that comes out. I think that would be, in fact, it's not a state visit, so there's not going to be any big pomp and pageantry to that that we'll be looking for in any case. It's going to be a low-level meeting in that sense. Now, the second point is, what do they want from each other? Okay, what does Modi want from Trump, or what does Trump want from Modi? And I would say that one thing that Trump is probably going to be looking for is the departure from the past. Here is a rich country, United States, that's going to be looking to India, a developing country, to see what is it going to do for me. What is India going to give the United States? So in that sense, the question for Trump will be, what is Modi coming to give me? What is Modi coming to give India, the US? Because he has a America First policy. And I think the question is, what kind of benefits? I mean, he is looking for direct benefits that he can send to US workers in particular, US companies, and so forth. For Modi, I think for India, the main thing will be to not to fall off the radar screen for the United States. To make sure that India stays at the high level rapport that is established now for the last so many years. So India will want some proof that it is still high on the list on US. And then also, that you referred to us here about the Make it America. I think we have to make hope that the economic irritants don't get in the way of the relationship, that these immediate irritants don't derail the relationship in some sense. I think also Modi will need to make sure that there's a more strategic convergence, the convergence that has been emerging, especially about the rise of China, the Asian balance of power, that those two, the meeting of the mind on that is reconfirmed. Now, the problem is that when you look at India-US relations on China and on the strategic level, the convergence is a long-term one. The threat is down the line, it's a long-term one, and the problem is that Trump is a short-term person, an immediate type, and I'm not sure that with low attention, sort of an attention deficit, so that if getting him to think about anything about a long-term is going to be a little bit more difficult. But that's going to be one of the tasks of Modi. So if you look at the expectations on the strategic, you can look at it in terms of strategic and also economic. And let me just say a couple of things first about the strategic partnership. So a third point on the strategic partnership. Already we have seen some indication from Trump when they had the first phone call where Trump said, oh, we'll be better and better friends, and then he said, no, not even better friends, best friends. But those are the kind of things that he throws out. I don't think you can put any too much confidence in those kinds of commentary. For Modi, the thing is that there is anti-terrorism that is high on the list, and here I think India and US, Modi and Trump has an area of agreement on the importance of fighting terrorism. The problem, of course, is that even though Afghanistan has been now under review and there's going to be more stepped up involvement, the priority for Trump is going to be ISIS and the Middle East. And my own sense is that that way in which they're going to treat Afghanistan may not still be as clearly as India would like it to be. But I think there is some comfort for India. I think the fact that Trump is going to stay engaged in Afghanistan will be it's going to be a welcome antidote to India, whereas as opposed to Obama, who was going to be pulling out. Now, in terms of, as I said, the China factor, I think again one issue that has come up, of course, Trump has flip-flopped on China. He's no longer calling it a currency manipulator. He's no longer pushing China. In fact, after the meeting, and with the North Korea crisis looming large, there's a new appreciation for the need for China, and I think that is going to be the number one, the number one need from for Trump, and therefore I think what Modi has to do is to convince or keep Trump's attention focused on the rise of China and the challenge that it poses, and how India and the United States can work on the same page on this. After all, that was the overall strategic convergence that brought them together in the first place. Now, you know, the Belt and Road Initiative that China launched. Now, there's very little commentary on that, whereas for India, the China-Pakistan economic corridor has been a big problem, and so I think there would be some use for Modi to bring that up. And to what extent Trump is going to respond to that? One of the problems is that there are not enough people in the U.S. There's no big champion within the American cabinet that wants to push the India-U.S. relationship. No big champion with that. I think there's a bit of a problem because Defense Secretary has numerous things on plate. Tillerson has almost, he is taking Trump's lead. Rather than setting some agenda for Trump, Tillerson seems to be simply following the Trump agenda, especially focusing on the Middle East and North Korea. I think those are the two things that they've got, Syria and Korea. But on the strategic arena, one thing is that you have what I would call a military industry sort of push by, and therefore defense sales is going to be something that will be very important, given the fact that India is such a big player in the arms market. So the sale of 22 drones, the Guardian drones for the Indian Navy, that just not announced, but it has been reported that it's been approved. That is a fairly big deal, as you mentioned. On the other hand, I should point out that the Indian Navy had entered the missile-fired drones rather than the unmanned drones, which is what they have approved. And the reason is that the missile-fired drones are only given to those countries that actually fight along with the United States. Now, you never know what kind of expectations Trump may have, or what kind of demands Trump may make in the way of joining the coalition with the United States against ISIS. I mean, you never know. But anyway, that's one point. The fourth point is the economics, and that is, I would just say that India could indeed come on Trump's hit list. And so India needs to make sure, Modi needs to make sure that India doesn't end up on Trump's hit list, given the reviews that are going on immigration, on H1 and the fact that there's reviews going on, looking at all the countries that US has trade deficits. India is number 9 on the US's trade partnership, but it is among the top 10 countries that US has a trade deficit with. So that's why the French might get trained on that, and I think Modi should make sure that, to shift that attention away. I mean, H1B visa is a big thing for Indian public, and Modi is going to have to focus on that a bit, but I'm not sure that that's going to really pay off. So finally, I would say that Modi, despite some of the good grades that he's been getting, overall, the last year, Indian foreign policy has not been very successful. Just have to look at China. Modi has been pretty forceful, but has not really gotten anything in return. Russia, the relationship has now kind of repaired. The US, again, quite a big uncertainty, and the only bright spot is really the region and maybe Japan. So let me leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am, for your detailed commentary.
May I now invite Professor Rajeev Sreenivasan to make his presentation.
Thank you very much. I hope I'm audible. I've enjoyed listening to both of you so far. And let me add my thoughts on what's going to happen with Prime Minister Modi's visit to meet President Trump for the first time. I'm going to concentrate, unlike Dr. Deepa, who talked broadly in terms of strategy, I'm going to concentrate very much on the deal-based approach that Trump has, and therefore on the short-term possibilities. And in particular, I'm going to talk about the trade aspects, which Dr. Deepa also did touch upon. But my belief is that India is pretty low on the priority list of Donald Trump, and that's indicated by the fact that it's been 9 months since he became president, and that is a pretty long time. I guess 9 or 7 months, something like that. It's a very long time for him to issue an invitation to India. And a number of leaders have already made their pilgrimages, if you will, to Washington, D.C., and China's strongman Xi was there in Maharaja, I guess in Florida, etc. So the fact that it's been so many months is a very strong indication that India is very low on the priority list. Secondly, there had been some talk about Tulsi Gabbard, who is a Democratic member of Congress, representative from Hawaii, who's a very strong supporter of India, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, she's the first Hindu in the House of Representatives in the U.S. It was expected that she would have a substantial position in the Trump administration. There was some talk of her being in the State Department, and there was also some talk of her being in the position of ambassador to India, which incidentally is another thing. We have not had an ambassador to India for the last 7 months, and I think just a few days ago, a somewhat nondescript person, I don't know anything about his background, and I also don't remember his name, Robert something. He was chosen sort of hastily, I guess, to be the U.S. ambassador to India. So these things, in my opinion, show that it was very much off the radar. And that is basically because there isn't that much by way of immediate trade benefit, because that's the point that I wanted to concentrate on. So if you look at Trump, you've seen that he's a deal maker, and if you look at his biography, I guess it's called The Art of a Deal. So he fancies himself as a deal maker, someone who's able to negotiate, twist people's arms, etc., and get a fantastic deal, an outcome for the U.S., and that's his self-image. If you look around over the last few weeks, he went to Saudi Arabia on his very first outside trip, and lo and behold, there was a $110 billion sale of weapons, although there have been some rumors that that's not new, it's something that had been in the pipeline. But in any case, Trump was able to show this off as part of his clever negotiation. And then later, even after the whole business of Qatar being sort of blackballed by the other Arab states in the Gulf, and Trump, despite the fact that the U.S. has a military base in Qatar, came out on the side of the Saudis and against Qatar, even then he was able to sell $7.5 billion worth of planes, or rather military equipment to Qatar. So what these things show, and then the third is deal with the Chinese. I believe that the reason he made a U-turn when he met Xi Jinping is because there was some quid pro quo on North Korea, which Xi was able to sell to Trump as something that would then force Trump to back off from some of the currency manipulation and freedom of navigation issues that he had been talking about during his campaign. So the deal, I believe, was that the Chinese would pressure North Korea to be nicer. But now that's sort of fallen by the wayside. In fact, I saw a tweet from Trump yesterday saying something to the effect that he was disappointed, and the proximate cause for that is the death of this gentleman named I've got his name, Jim something Beer, I think. A student who had been held in North Korea for a long time, and he was just released in a coma and he died. So maybe that deal didn't go through that well, but the point is that Trump is a deal maker. And if you look at India, India really doesn't have that much by way of things to give away. I was somewhat surprised by the Guardian drone deal, which came out of nowhere a couple of days ago, and then also the potential deal for building F-16s in India. Although there has been a lot of commentary on that from various different analysts saying that the F-16 has been around for almost 50 years and it's reaching the end of its useful life, and therefore there's less to this deal than meets the eye. But in any case, these are two deals that could be seen as satisfying Trump's deal-making interest. In fact, when Trump first came to power, I heard an article saying that the very first thing, the most important thing for him in his Make America Great again is to have a series of jobs being brought back to the U.S. And how can you do that except by exporting more? And that is certainly a big theme in his entire presidency. And specifically, there is the U.S. Trade Rep, this gentleman named Robert Lighthizer, who's a well-known tough guy, and he's a trade lawyer in this for a long time. And he came out with the Special 301 report in March or April, which continued to keep India in this category of a watch list. And in fact, if I remember right, it's not even watch list, I think it's a super watch list or something like that. I forget the term right now. And what it basically says is that India is a country that doesn't respect intellectual property, and it's a country that needs to be forcefully open to American goods and services. So this is a long-term irritant in Indo-American relationships. And in addition to this, there is the fact that all these sanctions that go back all the way to Pokhran have prevented cooperation in aerospace and defense. And those of us from Korea can remember the fact that there was this Maldivian spy case a long time ago, which in effect set back India's cryogenic rocket by about 20 years. And there is some reason to believe that that was, part of a deal that would have involved some American spy agencies. So there is that, plus the fact that we still haven't been able to do anything much by way of technology transfer in aerospace. Beyond that, there is a major issue with this Special 301 report that I went through in detail. Now, I have some background in intellectual property because I was one of the authors of India's new national policy on IPR, the first policy that India has had, which came out in 2016. And we, as the authors of that report, were very, very careful to emphasize repeatedly that India would be and has been completely compliant with TRIPS, that is the trade-related intellectual property agreements that the WTO mandates. Now, the Americans have been pushing on India to move away from TRIPS and to do something that is called TRIPS Plus, which is something that would typically help American interests. And there are 2 or 3 angles there which are probably things pushed by the big pharma, that is the big pharmaceutical industry in the US. And there is a provision in India's patent laws called 3D, which essentially says that once a drug goes off patent, it's not very easy to renew that patent. And that process is called evergreening. The American Patent Office is quite liberal in terms of renewing or extending patents for another few years. Whereas the Indian Patent Office has been very clear that unless there is significant novelty, we just cannot give you an extension on your monopoly and on your patent because you have just done some kind of minor tweak to it. This is an irritant that has been in Indo-American relations for a long time because they see that as big pharma sees India as a huge market. Obviously, there are a lot of sick people here, And secondly, because India's generics market has been something of a challenger to them. Because as you are probably aware, there are galloping costs in the US healthcare system. In fact, the US now spends roughly 20% of its GDP on healthcare without having the same kind of health as a number of European countries, for example, have. So I think the big pharma people and the health establishment of the US has actually been hoodwinking the American public and the American government by making them spend a lot of money. And one of the things that they're afraid of is if all these generics from India come in, that's going to reduce their margins. In fact, many people, they prefer the generics because they usually significantly less than maybe 10% or 20% of the price of the branded drug. So that's one major area of concern from the American side. The second is compulsory licensing. India has on its statutes the ability to make a compulsory license for a drug that we need in an emergency. And on average, that's a reasonable thing, but the American trade representative doesn't think so. And there's a third issue which has come up more recently, and that's about software copyrights and patents. There is a provision in the Indian laws called 3K in patent laws, which essentially says absolutely no patents for software, which is a reasonable position to take because software is essentially algorithms. Now, the Americans, as we know, are the superpowers in software products, and they are actually pushing for countries around the world to pick up their Digital Millennium Copyright Act, because they also use copyrights a lot as the weapon in software. They want to push open the Indian market, and it's a little confusing, but that's another area that they've been complaining about. So these two trade-related issues, in terms of the Special 301 and its emphasis on pharma and on software, are things that I think will make the ability of the Modi government to give major concessions to the US relatively low. And so that, I think, is going to make the entire conversation somewhat less than, charming from, or less than fruitful from the point of view of both parties. And the other point has been mentioned by both the previous speakers, foreign policy, national security, etc. India has actually not yet been able to convince the US that Balochistan and the fact that China will probably have a military base in Gwadar as part of its CPEC is a huge problem for the Americans, because Gwadar overlooks the Straits of Hormuz, and therefore about 80% of all the oil that's traversing the shipping lines from Hormuz to the Straits of Malacca are going to be jeopardized by Gwadar. So they've not been able to do that. And the other area is in the Middle East, where there's obviously a lot of trouble with Iran. India could potentially be an interlocutor to Iran, because India has fairly good relationships with Iran, but India has not forcefully put itself forward. And also with the troubles in Qatar and Saudi Arabia and their problems in the Middle East, India could potentially be a partner. And of course, the last and final point is about South China Sea, the freedom of navigation, and the quadrilateral that the Americans have been talking about, which is involving Japan, Australia, India, and to some extent Vietnam, and using this alliance to contain the Chinese. That was something that was talked about a lot before Trump came to power, but afterwards I think he has kind of downplayed that. And I was disappointed a couple of days ago to hear that the United States Navy, in fact, is now saying they're going to downplay their activities in the South China Sea. So let me conclude by saying that the trade issue is the uppermost issue in my mind, and I think that's what's going to make this summit useful or not. Foreign policy, I don't expect a great deal of progress. The other issue, climate change and immigration, I don't think these are very big in the minds of the Americans, except that they may want to sell India some shale oil, or rather shale gas, because they have a great deal of it. So with those points, I think I will really push them.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Rajeev Sreenivasan, for pointing out the major issues in India-US relationship, focusing on trade-related aspects. Before I invite next speaker, Vincent, it's interesting to note that both Modi and Trump is meeting after pulling off a major domestic victory. Trump with the Republican Party's victory in the Georgia elections, and Modi announcing a surprising candidate, Ramnath Kovind, for India's presidential election. Perhaps nobody expected his name to come up, so it will be interesting to see. So now I invite Vincent to make his presentation.
Yes, thank you so much, and for involved in organizing such a talk on the eve of Modi's visit. As we all expected during the elections, and because he attended the rally, the Indian rally and all that, Trump is going to be very charming, very friendly with India, and there is something magnificent going to happen, between India and the United States once Trump comes to power, was the kind of the anticipation. But as both panels before me have pointed out, and as we have seen, there was a little bit of a cooling of that enthusiasm as time went by the last 7 months. So the way I am seeing it, the reason is basically Trump is a very impatient person. He wants immediate results. So there are two things that is in this, in this current situation that it have caused that cooling, that we all kind of think that there is a real cooling. One thing is definitely the lack of immediate need. He's in the middle of a lot of controversies, a lot of issues that that is personally really damaging for him in terms of the issue, and at the same time ISIS is becoming a major problem. North Korea is becoming a major problem, and India is not at all attached to any of these issues. So that is one thing, and plus the realization that the way India moves is a relatively space for something that when compared to what Trump would like to see. As we know, we always go in a very traditional, very matured fashion when it comes to creating codes or relations or whatever that comes in the purview of Indo-American relations. We have been always being very proud of our moral high ground, the kind of approaches that we have when it comes to security issues or environmental issues or drugs, and what we speak type of dialogues and talk is not something that is going to produce any immediate result. So that might have been something that is in Trump's mind, that okay, dealing with India, it's a different type of thing, it's not my type of thing, type of an awakening. I'm not saying that definitely it makes the difference. If you compare these two leaders, Trump and Modi, they are very similar in nature. They both come from similar ideological background, being conservative, being small government advocates, being pro-business type of leaders, and both are very action-oriented people, and they are very risk takers, and they value results more than the approaches itself. They both won elections very convincingly and against many votes. They had very, very deserving victories in the election. So basically, Modi has an opportunity now to prove that India, that has been the last 75 years, is not anymore. We are ready for action. We are ready to work hand in hand with America to help America to be their ally in solving the problems that are being faced by America as the world leader. So we have an approach where we are kind of non-aligned and we consider America and Russia as equal, and we always want to be kind of voting in the UN based on our moral principles. That's not going to be something that's going to be that's not going to create a good relationship with a person like Trump. As we know, he's very impatient person. If you want American, you want to make America great. So basically, we have to be a partner in this in his approach of care of issues in the world, and we have to be proactive when it comes to dealing with whether it is terrorism, whether it is dealing with Afghanistan issues, whether it is dealing with Pakistan, whatever. We have to show more commitment to action. And this is an opportunity for Modi to prove that he's going to be a chief minister like that. And Modi might have been got used to Obama so much, being very similar to the Indian type of people, taking the moral high ground. But now, Trump, America is back to its normal, where they believe that we are number one, we want to control the issues in the world, and so we have to work with us. So that is where I see that this is a very delicate balance that Modi has to face here. One thing that would be exciting for Trump, in my opinion, is if we have a deal. If we have a broad deal, as we saw in the media today, or if we have some kind of a deal where India is going to pay billions of dollars to the United States, that is definitely going to be an exciting thing. Or India comes that, okay, we are ready to come in, take care of issues in our backyard, whether it is dealing with Afghanistan in a more proactive way, issues in Afghanistan in a more proactive way, or telling America that when it comes to South China Sea, we are ready to take a more proactive role, not being kind of, not interfering in other people's affairs type of philosophy. So that's all that narrative. And India has to understand who wants to be leaders, world leaders, that India claims that we have, first of all, principle type of. That's what the world operates. So definitely India has to show commitment and that, taking care of world issues alongside America, taking more risks, taking more chances. And that is where I think Modi has a chance to break from traditional Indian foreign policy so far that we have seen. And when it comes to the H1 issue, being an IT business and myself, there has been a lot of hue and cry about the H1 issue being something that is going to be very, very bad for the per se. In my point, from the late 90s, there has been the H1 boom, and a lot of people have come, and India has benefited tremendously. But in the process, Indian IT industry has matured to a point where our IT infrastructure that is already very mature and it is ready for innovation, it's ready to take the lead. So in this juncture, it is not a very critical thing that all Indians have to go to America and send the money back to India so that Indian economy can benefit because of that NRI. This is the time when Indian IT industry has to take the lead in innovation, in creative IT development, making products that are going to be the next in things that are the future of IT industry. So I think if India makes a big deal out of whatever Trump is trying to do, which is not basically to reduce H1 visas or anything, but to stop the abuse, that is not going to be considered as something that is a mutually beneficial thing. So what I am saying is, the H1 thing in itself, it's not a zero-sum game, as Indian media portrays to be. So basically, it's going to be a beneficial thing here. A lot of people stay back and innovate, and create more companies in India. So basically, that understanding has to be, a very clear background for Modi in his talking about explanation. And when it comes to China, as everybody has mentioned so far, the immediate benefit of maybe China playing a role in dealing with the North Korean issue, that has definitely contributed to Trump's friendly gesture to China. From days ago, he was saying that I know that at least they have tried. So there is something that has happened. They have proved that they have tried to help solve the North Korean situation. So definitely they are going to be acting. The Trump administration is going to be acting more like the American administrations in the past that have been acting for America's best interest, and that is the critical thing that the Indian administration has to have in mind. And instead of demanding so much because of moral high ground and our non-aligned type of foreign policy, we should be more proactive partner with the United States in dealing with the world situations and understanding the US problems and US aspirations from its point of view, so that Trump will resonate in a similar fashion. This is my thought in the Thank you.